But with a person with autism, you can't say they will or they won't be able to do this, that, or the other thing. You don't know. You have no idea how far they're going to come. And so you're always hoping for something that might or might not come to pass. And you go through that over and over and over and over. And sometimes, your child exceeds expectations, and sometimes they don't. And so there's never really a point where you say, well, that's as good as it gets. And so there's never an opportunity to say, okay, I accept.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mother's Guide Through Autism podcast. I'm Bridget Shipman, and I am your host. And today I'm very excited. This is the first interview of our grief series, and we're going to be talking to Lisa Jo Rudy. So I'm going to dive right in. Lisa and I are going to have an awesome conversation. And if you have a journal, grab it. You're going to learn a lot today. I have this really strong feeling along with me. So welcome, Lisa. Welcome to Mother's Guide.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Pardon me?
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Okay, so let's begin with your personal journey with autism. Would you tell us about your son and his diagnosis?
Sure. So our son, Tom, he's our first grandchild on either side. And he was born absolutely normally. Everything was fine. Every well baby check was fine. He went off to daycare, half-day daycare down the road at the local, in the church daycare. And after about a year, they said, there's something strange going on here. He's standing here in front of the mirror, holding things and looking at himself, but he's not playing with the other kids. We said, well, that's very strange. And after a while, we said, well, we'll just switch preschool. Maybe it's just the setting. So we took him to a different setting, and they said, we work with every kid. Said, great, wonderful. And about 3 months in, they said, there's something strange going on with your son, and we're not really comfortable having him here. And they essentially booted him out. So he had now been booted out of two daycares. And we went to our wonderful pediatrician, and we said, we have been told now twice that there is something going on with him. What do you think? And being a very sweet but older gentleman, he said to Tom, who is now about nearly 3 years old, Tom, do you like lollipops? And Tom said, yes. He said, which one do you want, the red or the purple? And he said, purple. The doctor said, he's absolutely fine. I don't know what's wrong with these people, but your son is absolutely fine. Okay. And it took us a while to finally say, what, we really need to have him evaluated. Clearly, we need some kind of preschool or daycare because I'm working. We can't just sort of go along with the doctor saying everything's fine. We were in the state of Pennsylvania, and there we go through the county, and they had a 3-person group who evaluated him. And Tom is now 26 years old. So at that time, this was pre-2013, there were 5 different autism spectrum diagnoses. And the wonderful, there was a group that included a psychologist, a speech therapist, and an occupational therapist. And we got the report from the wonderful psychologist who said, well, we are diagnosing your child with pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. And he said, okay.
I can relate, yes.
And what does that mean? Well, he has delays in more than one thing. And so, he's going to need some early intervention. All right. And he said, that's fine. And he said, then probably be a good thing to have OT and speech therapy. Okay. And whatever you do, he said, do not say yes to ABA. What the heck is ABA? Well, it's a kind of behavioral therapy where they were going to put him into therapy 40 hours a week, and you do not want that. I said, okay, fine. He never mentioned the word autism. It took probably another year for me to figure out that pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified was a part of the autism spectrum, and that ABA was the typical treatment for autism. I'd never heard of either one. And by the time I figured it out, we were deeply into developmental therapy and speech therapy and early intervention. And that was how it went. So it's kind of a strange story.
Yes, yes. My son also was diagnosed with PDD not otherwise specified, and I too did not have a clue of what that was. So, but I knew I did know that it was on the autistic spectrum, but nothing was really explained back then because Joseph is going soon to be 31 next month, and all I knew was that it wasn't good. And all I knew was I didn't know anything. So, yeah, right.
In the long run, after about 2 or 3 years, no, even more than that, I thought, we really ought to have another diagnosis because I've been writing about it by then for quite a while. I really ought to go see a developmental pediatrician just to be sure. And I went to the top person at Children's at Philadelphia, who weighed him and measured him and did all kinds of tests and said, yep, he's autistic. And I said, thank you very much, lady. And what am I supposed to do about it? She basically said, well, here's a printout from the web.
Yeah.
I knew it, which was not terribly helpful.
That I hear that the similarity in all of our stories so many times that you just get this, well, this is what it is. Hey, good luck. And so I want to talk about what your initial reaction was when you did discover that your son was in fact on the autistic spectrum. What were some of your struggles? What did you experience personally?
I think because it was kind of a strangely gradual process, by the time I heard the word autism, I had pretty much come to terms with an awful lot of stuff. I kind of knew that there were significant issues here and that he was not going to be a typical kid. So in a way that made it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But some of the things that I kind of wanted to share with other moms, and it was funny, I was talking to a grandmother, and she said, I think my grandchild is autistic, but I'm really not sure. She doesn't have enough social interaction, and I want her mother to join these groups of parents so that this child can have more exposure to other children. I said, well, you realize if you have an autistic child, they're not going to play with the other children. You can't just sort of show up and say, go play, and everything will be fine. You have to facilitate that 100%. And there will be anxiety and there will be issues. You can't just go do that. And I think that was one of the hardest things for me, was realizing that you sort of have this expectation when you have a baby, you're going to get to join the mommy club. And all the mommies get together with their babies and they do mommy things. And then they have soccer mom groups, and then they have music groups and band groups. And that was going to be this great way to, sort of build a social world for myself as well as for my child. And realizing that was a no-go was tough. And the other thing that was hard for me was saying, okay, I'm in the autism world. This is different. I need to find a group of autism parents. But they are so different from each other. Their children are so different from each other. And some of them are at an intensity level that is they're so fraught with anxiety that it can be harder to be with them than not to be with them.
Yes.
So, and at that time, which was the early 2000s, it was a very political landscape. It's a little bit less so now, but the differences of opinion were overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And people could get into yelling matches. So that also made it very hard to find sort of a tribe of people who would in any way get it. And, and you couple that with the fact that, you read about how you need a team to support your child and go, oh, great, a team sounds wonderful. And of course, there's no team. There are individuals who don't know each other.
Yes.
And, so you're the team and you're making that team and you're managing that team. And so I think for me, the sense of sort of you're on your own, kid, was harder than I anticipated.
Yeah, I love that you're sharing that because my situation is very similar. And what I figured out quickly was, oh, there aren't really resources where I personally live. And if there are any resources, it's going to take me a long time to to get in to find them. And it's going to be a lot of travel, which, Joseph did do great with. It was a very overwhelming stress. So yeah, so I did similar to you, and I built my own tribe, and I tried to help other parents along the way as I found answers for Joseph. But like you're saying, not like and how my son words it is, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one. So
And that's pretty much what everybody says. And that's
yeah,
absolutely right. And the same thing goes for autism parents.
yeah,
What they want, what they need. That was one of the things that was very tough was, I'd find these autism moms who seemed to have kids sort of on a similar plane to mine. But what they wanted for them was something very different than I wanted for my son, because we
hmm
differ on what kind of therapy. Should it be inclusive programming, or should it be mainstream program, or should it be, specialized programming? Should it be behavioral? Should it be developmental? Should it be, and the differences were such that it was very hard. And some of these moms had kids who were sort of Asperger's type boys who were very bright on math and technology. And boy, did they love that. And they all loved each other because they loved gaming. And my son hates all of that stuff. He is a storyteller who loves art, and music.
yeah, yeah. So is mine.
Just,
Yeah.
there's a lot of assumptions made too. So that makes it tough.
Yeah, and it is. There's autism is big and it's different. And when you first get that diagnosis, especially, and this is why I wanted to do this grief series. And we found you because you wrote an article called Coping with Grief After an Autism Diagnosis. And so I would love for you to share with us what your experience was like with grief and that article that is so helpful.
Oh, gosh. I think I don't think that autism is unique in this way at all. I think
Yeah.
people come into parenthood with a lot of expectations that don't get met no matter who your baby is. I
Yeah.
mean, unless they're, Shirley Temple. I mean, it's just, you come into it with this kind of, oh, this is going to be, a chip off my old block and a chip off my husband's old block, and granddad's going to be so happy and grandma's going to be so happy. And this kid is going to just, shine in every possible way. And of course, the kid actually fulfills all of that. But when you have a kid with any kind of developmental differences, you find yourself, and of course, I'm sure it must be much, much harder under different circumstances. Autism can be relatively easy compared to some of the issues that parents face. You realize that there are a lot of things that your child will never be able to do, that you really, beyond saying, oh, they're going to be, the star of, stage and screen, or, the NBA, but, just the ordinary come to grandma, or the, dad getting all excited because he's going to get to coach their little league team, or the just ordinary, I love you mommies, that you expect and you assume will happen no matter who your child is.
Yeah.
That either don't happen or don't happen anywhere near the point at which you can expect them to happen. And you feel like you've kind of lost out on being a parent in the usual sense, that you'd hoped for when you went through 9 months of pregnancy, with this kid kicking around inside of you and all the hopes and dreams. And it's not going to be like that. And it's not going to be like that for you. And it's not going to be like that for the people who also have a vested interest in that happening. And so, there's also that kind of little bit of guilt that I brought this baby into the world and I'm not the baby that mommy wanted me to bring into the world, or my husband wanted me to bring into the world. And there's the worry that, did I do something? Was there something that I did during the pregnancy that might have caused this to happen. And while that's unlikely, it's by no means impossible. And so that's another issue that I think a lot of moms not only, sort of feel, but they sometimes go searching to find somebody did something that caused this. And so that in itself can be a whole set of emotional issues.
Yeah, yeah. I think that when I, because I coach moms, and really try to help them navigate this really big, I call them life tsunami. And one of the things I think that they don't relate to the word grief or the process of grief when they get that diagnosis, all the things that you're talking about. And so when I say, well, are you grieving? Or if I bring up grief, they're like, well, what is grief on an autism journey? How can you relate grief to autism?
I think with any difference, with any time that you have an expectation that is lost, a meaningful expectation that's lost, you grieve for it, even if it's something as basic as I did all of my work and I got my degree and I'm looking for my job and I'm not getting that career. You grieve for that because it's something that you worked for and you cared about and wanted to bring to fruition, and it just didn't. And it's hard. Um it's a difficult place to be, and it takes time. And I think the other thing that's difficult about autism, and I found it to be myself, is the reality that you don't have a nice straightforward prognosis. So you can't really say, okay, my baby was born blind, they can't see, therefore, and they're not going to be able to see. So that's a reality. And so therefore we need to find them the right schooling and the right support so that they will be successful as a blind person. But with a person with autism, you can't say they will or they won't be able to do this, that, or the other thing. You don't know. You have no idea how far they're going to come. And so you're always hoping for something that might or might not come to pass. And you go through that over and over and over and over. And sometimes, your child exceeds expectations and sometimes they don't. And so there's never really a point where you say, well, that's as good as it gets. And so there's never an opportunity to say, okay, I accept. In the usual sense either.
Yeah, there's a lot of pain associated, at least, I can speak for myself and some of the other moms I've spoken to. And you wrote about in the article, managing and even overcoming pain. Would you talk about that and give our listeners some insight?
Years ago, and I should remember who wrote it. A woman, an autism mom, wrote a piece called "Welcome to Holland." Are you familiar with that?
Yes, and I love that. And I've actually done an episode on Mother's Guide Through Autism about that poem. It's beautiful.
So what it really comes down to is that process of determining, okay, and I guess her thought was something along the lines of, you planned this fabulous trip to Britain and you were going to travel all over Scotland, you were going to travel all over this, that, and see the crown jewels, and then everything went crazy and you wound up in Amsterdam. And damn it, I worked and slaved to create this fabulous trip. And it was going to be this, it was going to be that, it was going to be the other. And now here I am, nowhere near where I wanted to be. And then you kind of look around and you say, oh, but I'm in Amsterdam. Look at those tulips, and that process, not everybody goes through that. Not everybody has that. And I realized that part of there's been a lot of things that I've realized have made me a little bit different as an individual, as a person. One of the things, as I said, that happened to me very early on was I was steered toward developmental therapy. And I was told, go talk to this particular mother. So I went and talked to this mother, and she said, the thing you want to do is something called 4 time. And floor time, as I'm sure everybody knows, and I'm sure, is a form of play therapy that developmental play therapy that's intended to build communication skills, which are the most basic deficit in autism. And it was created by a guy named Stanley Greenspan. And Stanley Greenspan, in my opinion, was in his own way a genius. He was that guy who could walk into a room where a child was behaving like an absolute lunatic, racing around the room with no ability to communicate whatsoever. And in 5 minutes, he turned that child into a child. He just figured out how to, like, the button to push, the way to smile, the thing to hold, and suddenly that kid was communicating and engaging. And his take on all of this was, what you're trying to do is spark joy. And I thought, this must be a good human being, because I've never heard another person refer to the word joy and autism in the same breath.
Yeah.
And the downside is that when you're a genius, you don't really quite understand why everybody else doesn't get why it isn't working good. They don't get what you're doing. So you show these videos where these poor mothers are sitting there going, "Come on, Johnny, come sit with me." And Johnny would just keep running around the room, and then you'd watch Dr. Greenspan, and he just knew how to make it work. So I happened to be lucky enough to grow up in a family where imagination was highly valued. So I thought, well, this looks like fun. Let's play. So I set aside time and I read all the books and I read the videos and I went to a conference and I learned how to do floor time. And it was fun. And it was exciting to watch my kid start to communicate and then have his own ideas and then play on his own. Now, he never became a not autistic kid, but it was fun. It was positive for me. I liked it. I mean, whether it was my kid or anybody else's kid, I would have liked it. And that was kind of a big thing for me, was to say, I can be this boy's mom and enjoy it. Have fun doing it. Get a boot out of it. Learn something new. And then I started writing about autism because I figured if I was going to learn this much about it, I might as well make a nickel out of it, which I'm sure you can relate to.
Yeah. Yes.
I became the about.com guide to autism, and that was very exciting too, and learned a tremendous amount, and then got into the whole very political world of the early 2000s relative to debates about vaccines and so on and so on. So that was very exciting. So I was finding all these interesting ways to build on having a child with autism. And so that was very interesting for me and exciting for me. So I didn't feel that sense of undeprived. I felt like this is something I can engage with. And as Tom got older, he started to show some interest in music. And so that was a whole adventure, I'm so proud of having, I lived in Philadelphia, and you go say, well, I'd like my child to have clarinet lessons. I go, well, he's autistic. Yes, he is. Well, he should be in music therapy. Well, music therapy is lovely. Are they going to teach him how to play the clarinet? Well, no, but he needs to learn how to play the clarinet. Part of something.
Yeah.
Like telling me a school band. Well, we don't really work with kids like that.
Mm.
So it took me a very long time and a lot of poking, and I found a young woman who was willing. She was 21 years old. She'd just gotten out of music school, and she said, oh, well, happy to give it a shot. And she taught Tom to play both the clarinet and the piano, which was quite an achievement. And of course, I had to be there with him. So I learned how to play the clarinet.
Lovely.
Build on that.
Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing you say for moms listening out there, some of the ways to move through pain is to really shift your perspective and realize that, just like the poem that you referred to, that there is joy. There is joy. We just have to be able to say, okay, I am grieving, understand the grief, feel whatever it is you feel, but also to know that there is joy in it, because I too find joy with Joseph. And I talk about him so much in my half of the book, A Mother's Guide, in that he's my best teacher. And I wouldn't be the human that I am without this kid. So, yeah,
Tom has changed me dramatically,
yes,
in very good ways.
yeah, yeah. So there is honor the grief, move through the pain, do that, but also you just know that that's the first thing I say to a mom is, you're going to be okay. Everything's okay. You're going to find you're going to find your way. And as you move along the journey, as you well know, because your son Tom is an adult now, when you started, we're going to switch gears right now, because I know you're passionate also about preparing the kids for adulthood. And what was that experience with your son? What would you like to share about that?
Yeah, so I actually wrote a book called Get Out and Have Fun, about getting a kid with autism into the community. What I realized pretty early on is that the thing that Tom is sort of moderately autistic. I would say he is not very high functioning, but he is functional.
Yeah.
And he's a delightful guy. He's got a lot of strengths. But what I realized made him, and I think most kids with autism, different, is that they don't imitate. And so you put, and that because they don't imitate, they have to be directly taught everything. And because they have to be directly taught everything, it is an effort to learn, for example, how to be a good kindergartner, how to be a good first grader. So I realized that the way that our culture is set up, we expect kids to constantly change, not only from kindergarten to first grade, but from little league to sort of the pony league, and then you keep going up and keep going up and keep going up, and you keep changing, and the rules change, the expectations change, the social behaviors change and change and change. But what he really needs are skills that he doesn't have to keep changing. He needs to have skills that are going to stand him in good stead in adulthood, because I don't think he's going to be a college kid. He's not going to be at that level. He needs to be able to have a place in society, and the skills that he's going to build now have to be still useful at that time. And so I focused a lot on that. And so things like music, he learned to play the clarinet and piano, and it was not easy for that teacher. By the time he was in grade 4, he was more advanced than the other kids, but they still didn't want him in band because there was no aide who knew how to play the clarinet. So I became his aide so that he could be in the band. But long story short, he is now playing clarinet in the town band here in our town. They put on something like 14 concerts a year, and he is a valued part of that group, and he plays as well as anybody else. So it's a huge skill. And I've noticed that a lot of autism parents tend to ignore things like, well, if he can't get through the Walmart, how the hell is he going to be able to play the clarinet? It's like one thing has nothing to do with the other. And the ability, if he can't get through Walmart, you just have him deliver. However, if he can play music, he has a valued role in society, because there's always going to need, particularly band instruments. Honestly, piano's great, but he also plays organ. He decided he wanted to learn how to play the organ. There was an organ player. God knows there was an organ. So, these are, I took him to the Y. I wanted to make sure he knew how to swim. I wanted to make sure he knew how to bowling. I wanted him to be able to go to museums and enjoy them, which was a huge process. But he is now a very cultured person because he loves going to museums, but it took a lot to get to that place. He can, it took a long time for him to be able to go to concerts, go to movies, But the reality is that in the long term, they are more valuable skills than knowing how to be than knowing how to be appropriate at a children's birthday party.
Mhm.
That may not come until they're 15 years old. It's too late. But it's never going to be too late to be able to go to a concert.
Yeah.
There's always an opportunity for that. We got very involved with the Y, which is, I can't say enough for the Y as an organization for the family to get involved with. They are incredibly inclusive, supportive. They don't cost. If you don't have money, they will pay for you. And he went to summer camps at the Y that were inclusive because that's just what they do. They don't really think much about it. They just do it. So those types of skills are what I focused on a lot. Not to say that I didn't focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic, but reading is fine, but writing and arithmetic never really came.
Mhm.
But that's okay because we have tools for that. We have apps for that, So that is that answer the question?
Yeah. I think you're giving some great tips and insights for some of the things that really helped your son transition into adulthood. And that what I'm hearing is these are life skills, and also you're following his lead of what he loves and what he enjoys, because that's who he is as a human, right? And now he has these skills, these tools. And I know that you're a passionate advocate also for inclusion, and you had brought up the why, but in educational settings like museums and zoos, which my son Joseph absolutely loves as well. So why is this important, and what can we do more of to accomplish that?
Thank you for asking. So I started out in my career as a writer for a museum and science museum. And so it never really occurred. And my husband was a museum person too. So it never occurred to us not to take our kids. We have a daughter as well, to take our kids to museums. And if they got antsy, we just went home and came back the next time. It never really occurred to us not to. But what I have learned is that there are a couple of issues that come up in museums that kind of trouble me. And one of them relates to parents. Moms in general tend to be very embarrassed by their children with autism, or autistic children, however you want to put it. I put it both ways. They are uncomfortable with the possibility that they're going to be judged by other parents. And so therefore they tend to segregate themselves. And particularly children's museums have started becoming but not just them, have become very aware that this is what moms want, is segregated experiences. And so they will provide autism only experiences in the museums. So you'll have autism night at the zoo or autism morning at the children's museum. And the only people who come are parents of children with autism, along with maybe a toddler sibling as well. And because of that, parents feel more comfortable in that setting. The problem with that, of course, is that it's pleasant, but it doesn't necessarily help your child to develop the skills they need to be successful in that setting in the long term, because everybody's very laissez-faire. And they say, oh, poor baby, he has autism, she has autism, we can't expect anything of them. So therefore they will, if they scream and yell and throw things around and have no idea what's going on, that's fine. But the reality is, in many cases, that child could get something out of the experience and could learn to enjoy it in the mainstream. And nobody's really trying. And it's much easier for museums and other institutions to have a special day than it is to find ways to be inclusive in a general way. That's not the case across the board, but it's largely the case. And so it is often up to the parent to figure out how to make it work. So in my book, I wrote a lot about it, but the gist is, if you want your child to go to young people's concerts, or you're wanting because they love music, or you think that they love science and claiming things, and the Children's Museum would be wonderful for them. Get a membership. Go for as long as it is fun. Go away, come back another time, make it familiar, do it again, do it again, do it again, find the route that works, then expand on it. It takes all of these things. And this is the thing is, it takes a lot. It takes a lot. It takes a lot for a child with autism to learn to play the clarinet. It takes a lot for them to learn to go to a concert and enjoy it. It takes a lot for them to be a good swimmer. And it's not the kind of thing where you can sort of say, as every other parent gets to say, here you go, here's my kid, have fun, bye. You go out and
Yes.
have fun with girls. It just isn't going to work that way.
Right.
So it also makes a big difference if you choose the activities that, yes, your child likes and you like.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I also did those things with Joseph, and what I found was that the more he could in fact experience, the better he understood it. So yes, we did a lot of reading. Joseph is an avid reader, but when I took him places and we did experience it, then yes, he built confidence. He had a better understanding of the world. And so I agree with that. And I think that it is hard. And that's why I work with moms who have kids on the spectrum, because yes, we need that support from each other and the understanding. I think that's a big piece of it too, is that so many folks don't understand what it is we're going through and why we need what we need and why it's so hard.
And I think that for me, in parenting in general, and particularly in parenting Tom, making sure that whatever it is that you choose to do with your child does not piss you off. If you hate, soccer, and you're going to have to be there with your child, holding their hand every time they don't kick the damn ball, don't choose soccer. Unless your child's absolutely bananas about it, the fact that everybody else's kid is playing soccer is irrelevant. Choose the thing that you think might be fun for you as well as for your child, because you're going to be doing an awful lot of it. You're going to be hand holding, you're going to be supporting, you're going to be making it happen. So if you don't like it, you're going to get resentful of your own kid.
Yeah.
And that's just not a good place to be.
Yeah.
I took my kids to the water. I'm like, I am not going to stand here and watch them swim. I'm going to get in the water. It's ridiculous. I'm going to stand here and watch them bowl. I'm going to bowl because I want to live my life, and my life includes 2 kids. One of them has autism, and so I'm not going to not live my life. And I think that's a big important thing to remember, is that you have a life and you have choices. You don't have to do what everybody tells you to do, or try to make your child as much like everybody else's as you can. I had this experience this weekend, cracked me up. Believe it or not, I do medieval longsword dancing. Yes, that is very weird.
Wow, cool.
Yes. So, but I'm not very good at it. But this lovely woman in our town put together a whole event with young kids who do something called rapper dancing, which is like, if you've ever seen Irish dancing, this is like on steroids with swords, with flips. I mean, it's crazy. And here are all these teenagers, boys and girls, and kids who are trans, and there's probably 30 of them. And there they all clog dancing away and doing these circle dances. I'm like, I asked one of them, like, where do all of these kids come from? And they said, oh, well, there's a subculture of homeschoolers in Boston whose parents are traditional dance, like English dance people, and have brought their kids into this world. And this is the world we know. And this is what we do. We do and talk about a specialized, weird little world that nobody's ever thought about. And I thought, if you could live in the world of rapper dance,
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about not being typical. And yet, these kids aren't autistic. They don't have special needs necessarily. They're just doing something that other kids don't do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that their kids think is, that their parents think is absolutely fantastic.
Yes, I think that's a lovely example of how to just get out there and do your child, and just try to find things that you do enjoy. Because yeah, I mean, whether they're neurotypical or, there's disabilities, I think too, because my youngest son is neurotypical and he loves cars. So I'm getting in on that. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk cars, I try to learn about that. Am I just loving it? No, but I tell you what, I am surprised at how much that I am interested in now, and that I pay attention. And so, yeah, there's a lot to be said for really enjoying the journey, embracing it, loving your kid, let them follow and show you what's fun out there, and just, being a part of it. Uh, I want to ask you before we go, what is your best advice for moms raising kids, a child or more than one on the spectrum?
Best advice. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I think that thinking about those skills that will be meaningful over time as being important,
Yeah.
not as being sidelines to reading, writing, arithmetic, and being a good first grader, is important. Finding those places in the wider community where your child can be successful, whatever their strength is, playing to it, building on strength. One of the hardest things with the IEP system is that it focuses entirely on what your child cannot do. And so and you can't change that. So it's up to you to say, okay, but here are the things they can do. How do I build on that?
Mhm.
And I have to say, yeah, I mean, one of the things I discovered is that sometimes living with your autistic child is way easier than living with the people who surround your autistic child. And I finally couldn't stand trying to make the school district do the things that I knew that they needed to do. So I just said, I'm going to take my marbles and go home, and I homeschooled them for a few years. The fact that other people are looking for certain things or have certain expectations doesn't make them right.
Mhm.
Sort yeah, that's important to remember. Look, and like Dr. Greenspan said, if you can find a way to be joyful with your child, that's going to change your whole perspective on what it is to parent. The other thing that I think is really hard to do and probably very important to do is to work with your partner. If you are a partnered parent, it's really easy. I have learned for myself, and I've seen others as well, to say, look, I'm just going to take this on. This is my problem. I'm going to deal with it. I know all the doctors. I'm taking them all the therapists. I know all the names of things. I know all the, paperwork. Why should you get yourself involved? I'll just handle it. And I did that. And then I got very resentful of my husband having not a single clue as to what was going on. And being embarrassed of, having a child who was different and all of that. And then one day, we decided that it would be a good thing for Tom to go to the young people's concerts in Philadelphia. And I said, it's not going to be easy for him. But we had taken him to the art museum a few times, and my husband loved both of these places. The Academy of Music, which is drop dead gorgeous. Actually, it was the Verizon Hall that stuff, and the art museum. And he took Tom to the young people's concert by himself because I couldn't go. And then he said, you know what, let's go have lunch at the art museum. And they had so much fun. And it was the first time he had ever had fun, just dad and son. And it became a thing they did every single month. And Tom, because he was very into art and watched all these silly cartoons that had, I don't know if Einstein's TV show that had fine art. And he was that 7-year-old or 8-year-old who stood there in the art museum and said, Daddy, look, it's Monet's garden. The other parent, why can't you be more like his kid? And I realized the importance of making time and opportunities for your partner to bond and not to just hold it to your chest because somebody has to handle all this difficult stuff. So
That's great advice. That's great advice. I agree. It doesn't always have to be us. There are others that are important, and also other relationships for our kids to be able to form as they're on their own journey. I love that. I love that. Is there anything else you want to mention? Where can people find you? You've done some awesome work. Where can they go?
well, I have a lot of my work on verywellhealth and verywellfamily.com. So you can find my writing there. There's also a website called autisminthemuseum.org, which I created but haven't updated a whole lot, but you can find me through that. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that one of the things I am learning is that a lot of parents are not doing a lot of looking ahead. And I just wanted to kind of put it out there that if your child is coming toward the age of 18, it is absolutely the right time to start looking into what is available to them as they get older, both while, Social Security, while they're in school. There's sometimes internships offered, all kinds of stuff for kids their age. You're going to need to look at issues related to guardianship if you want to go that route. If you don't, where you want to go. There's a lot to think about, but once you put the pieces into place, they're done.
Yeah.
And, if you think about it earlier, you'll get the services earlier. That's not to say you can't get them later, but why miss out on some really neat opportunities if you can make them happen?
Yeah, again, great things to think about. And so folks can reach out to you, and thank you for sharing that information. And also thank you for all the insight and advice and sharing your story with us. And we all learn from each other. And that's why I love doing what I do. I love sharing stories, and really knowing that we're on our own separate journeys, but we sure can support each other along the way the best that we can.
Thank you so much. This has been great, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, thank you. The honor's all mine. And anyone listening out there, if you thought this episode was beneficial to you, please like and subscribe Mother's Guide Through Autism YouTube page, and let's help each other. Let's get the word out there. This is all about spreading hope and knowledge and inspiration. That's what we're doing here. So the more folks we can reach, the more that can really learn from these episodes and walk away with a lighter heart. So I'll see you in the next episode. We will continue our grief series, and please reach out to us if you have any questions or comments. See you in the next episode.